Hey everyone, before I start this review, I just wanted to say that I hope you guys are staying safe and well throughout this crisis, if you will. I hope you guys are washing those hands, staying home. You're taking the necessary measures in order to stay safe and keep the ones you love protected and safe. No, we will get through this, but we've just got to believe and we've got to do all the right things. So anyway, without further ado, on lighter terms, let's get into the Flash Season 6 review. Hey Genevaders, it's me Jordan and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, Genevaders, it's been about a month since I've last posted. Obviously, we're all stuck inside at the moment, so I've pretty much got no excuse for doing that. So I sincerely apologise, but I'll try to be a bit more frequent going forward. But this week, on Wednesday, my time at least, the final episode of The Flash Season 6 aired. Obviously, it's episode 19. It should have been episode 22, but this whole pandemic has shut everything down. So unfortunately, they never got to film their final 3 episodes. So the thing about this review is it's really tough to judge it based off, complete story arcs, because we never actually got to see how we would have properly wrapped up, like, if this didn't happen. So it's hard to review this season, but I'm going to try and give it my best shot. Anyway, so this review is going to be working a little bit differently to normal. I'm not just going to be talking about the good, the bad, the mixed. That's what I'll be doing first. But as I can't really, I don't know, I feel like I have to, in order to best describe my thoughts on the season, I have to break it down character by character and what I thought about their character arcs throughout the season and, what I'm looking forward to next season. So, for example, I'll talk about Barry and, what I thought about the Speed Force dying and, how it affected him, or then I'll talk about Caitlin, Killer Frost and Caitlin sort of becoming one and becoming Frost, or, Nash becoming Reverse Flash or whatever. So, yeah, I'll be breaking it down by character after I briefly talk about the good, the mixed, and the bad stuff. So, without further ado, this is my Flash Season 6 review. I hope you guys enjoy. Here we go. Alrighty, so as I said in the introduction, the first part of this review is going over my general thoughts on the season, what I thought was really good, what I thought was, it was alright, and what I thought was, it was not good, it was bad. And so this is general, storylines and general, the theme, or general ideas, certain character moments and certain character arcs and stuff like that I'll get to later when I go through each character. But yeah, this is just, just general discussion. So, we're kicking off this discussion with the good stuff. The things that I loved about this season, the things that really stood out for me. And there are 3 things in this list. It could be much, much longer, but obviously I'm trying to keep it as short as possible so I can get into later detail when I get to the characters. So the first thing that I loved about the season was that I loved how thought out the season was in advance, with the new showrunner Eric Wallace planning out exactly which story beats would happen when, in order to drive the narrative forward. So this was much more evident in this season, with him explaining the system he had in mind even before the season began at San Diego Comic-Con. He's explained there are 2 graphic novels being split into 3 different acts with 2 different villains. Look, Season 5 was very disorganised and, in my opinion, felt very, very rushed and made up at the last minute. And regardless of the fact that we didn't actually get to see how it was originally intended to play out, I think Eric did a great job laying out the groundwork to the season prior and setting up mysteries like the Godspeed mystery, which we will encounter at a later date. Now, speaking of Godspeed, I also loved how they were drawing most of the ideas from the season, from the Rebirth comics, introducing Bloodwork and introducing Godspeed, who were only really introduced in comics a few years ago, rather than ages ago, Reverse Flash and Captain Cold and stuff. It gave the show a new feel, and for people who just started reading the latest comics, including myself, they also get to simultaneously get to see it being portrayed in live action as well as in the comics at the same time. So I thought that was really, really cool. And the final thing I have under the good stuff, remember there are a lot more good stuff about this, but I'll get to it later on in the character development. I love that they utilized Crisis very, very effectively in my opinion, and that allowed them to do very, very cool things and reintroduce certain ideas or just, bring back characters that we've never seen before. Minus, I did not like seeing her again. She was very, very irritating. But we saw Wally come back with brand new powers and dealing with the repercussions from Crisis. We also get to see Ragdoll come back, which was really, really cool. And in regards to Crisis changes, seeing Hartley Rathaway, aka Pied Piper, come back, and we find out that post-crisis, like, the reason why he's a villain is, like, completely different, like, before, with the Flash knocking out his sidekick or whatever, or his boyfriend, and so I thought that was very, very cool. Yeah, it was really, really cool seeing all these people come back and, dealing with the crisis repercussion, and I thought that they utilised that event very, very well. So, that is all the good stuff I have currently. As I said before, I'll get to more stuff I loved later when I get to specific character storylines. But yeah, that's just the general stuff that I really, really loved. Now let's move on to the stuff that I thought it was okay, but I didn't think it was great or bad. And this is the mixed stuff. Alright, so the first and only thing in the mixed category is the tone of the season. Like, as soon as within, like, the first 5 minutes of Season 6, I instantly knew that this was, like, an entirely different feel of the show. The tone was completely different. And I don't know, I felt this, it was just a completely different feel to the show as soon as the season kicked off. And that was something that it took me a very, very long time to get used to. And I really got used to it in, like, the last few episodes, which shouldn't be that bad. But to me, I feel like it took away a little bit from the season. But then again, I also really loved that Eric Wallace made his own twist on the show, and he made it his own rather than, exactly what we were, seeing with the last 5 years with, Aaron Halbig and Tom Halbig and Andrew Kreisberg and all those. And so I think it was a great way to, distinguish itself from previous seasons, but also it took a while to get used to. So that's the only reason why it's in this category. I'll talk more about the actual tone when I get to Barry, which is coming up right after the bad stuff, which is coming up right now. So here we go. Okay, so the first bad thing about this season is obviously the fact that it only has 19 episodes and never gets the chance to fully close out the story. Now, I am in no way at all blaming the writers, blaming Eric Wallace, blaming the cast, nobody at all. I'm blaming COVID-19, and that's it. I am very, very annoyed that it never got to actually properly, wrap up as it was supposed to before. I'm not saying that this is a fault to the writers, not at all. I'm not saying that. Please do not get me wrong. I'm just saying that it brought down the season, that it never got to fully complete itself. And I really, really hope that in Season 7 it doesn't rush to complete the storyline in like 2 episodes, but, rather actually gets to properly, write it the way it was supposed to be. So he's hoping that that's what happens, but obviously, as we'll have less episodes next season, it'll be much harder to do that, but I'm going to be optimistic. The second thing is Episode 11, Love is the Battlefield, Amunet, Black, Goldface, worst villain, cringiest episode, hated Mirror Iris, hated the comedy in it, it was so bad. Anyway, so those are the 2 big things I was not a fan of, and actually, I hated, I'm just going to say, I hated that we didn't get to wrap the storyline up, and I hated that episode. That was terrible. Alright, now let's move on to the character studies, which is the evaluation of the character arcs and the character journeys throughout the season. So, here we go. Alright, so I'll be kicking off the character studies with the main cast, which is listed on Wikipedia, most reliable and trustworthy source, I know. But anyway, kicking off with the titular role, which is the Flash, aka Barry Allen, portrayed by Grant Gustin. Now, in regards to the actor who plays Barry Allen, Grant Gustin, I thought he was phenomenal, as always. Especially in episode 7 when he cried over baby Nora's crib with Ramsey controlling his mind. That scene was amazing. But in regards to the actual character himself, Barry throughout both halves of the season, or both graphic novels as Eric calls it, we see a darker and brooding Barry, with him preparing for his death in the first half, or supposed death, and losing his speed and trying to get Iris back in the second, which isn't necessarily the version I would prefer to see. Like, if I want to see a dark and brooding show, I tend to go for Arrow, whereas if I want to see a light-hearted and optimistic show, I'd go for The Flash. While I do feel a sense of realism is important, taking The Flash in too far of a negative direction, in my opinion, is a bad idea. And Season 3 is literally a perfect example of this. Luckily, Season 6 did not go this far at all down this direction again, but yeah, it was still, I wasn't that big of a fan of that tone. Additionally, unlike I think a majority of people, I did not really see a problem with him losing his speed. As well, the reason for his Speed Force dying makes barely any sense at all, with the Spectre touching or whatever. It makes no sense. I completely understood why the writers chose to make it so, as in my opinion, with Barry's speed at full capacity, he could have easily defeated Eva. I also really love the Season 6 suit, and while I have certain nitpicks, like the way the neck folds into the chest, or, that weird diamond he has on his stomach, and the fact that in motion is much more creasy and doesn't look as good, it is still amazing, and most definitely my favourite Flash suit, with the Season 4 one close second. Now let's move on to Candace Patton, aka Iris West Allen, and Amira Iris West Allen. Iris West Allen was a very interesting and complicated character this season, as she had 2 completely different arcs in both graphic novels, including a complete opposite copy of the character. In the first graphic novel, we see her growing the Central City citizen, which is something we've been expecting since the newspaper reveal in the pilot, and been teasing in interviews over the last 3 years, but the idea was finally put to fruition this season, which I thoroughly found enjoyable. I'm glad that she was not the leader of Star Labs, let alone even visiting there often, because that's not who Iris is. Iris is no scientist, she's no superhero team leader, she is a journalist, and I'm so glad she finally got back to her roots and what originally made her character so great in Season 1. And in the second graphic novel, there were many times where I felt as if the Mirrorverse storyline was going absolutely nowhere, and was being purposely dragged out a lot. Whereas at other moments I was very attached to the storyline, and I'm very annoyed it was unable to be fully wrapped up this season, the way it was supposed to be. Mirror Iris was also very frustrating at times, and although I loved how manipulative she was, regardless of what Grant says in interviews, Team Flash, and especially Barry and Joe, should have figured that out much earlier, in my opinion, that was not Iris. The episode Barry figured it out I found to be very rushed as well, in my opinion, but regardless, I'm happy with the direction Iris went as a character this season. More in the first graphic novel than in the second. Now moving on to Danielle Panabaker, aka Caitlin Snow/Frost. Like Iris, Caitlin is also a very interesting and complicated character to review, due to the actress Danielle Panabaker's situation with her pregnancy. But before we get to how her character was wrapped up for this season, let's talk about Frost and the evolution of her character this season. We start off this season with a brand new costume, which is very vibrant and definitely the most comic book accurate costume. I love it so much. Caitlin was in this season a very minimal amount, with Killer Frost, now renamed Frost, taking control majority of the time, which I wasn't that big of a fan of. Although I do love Life Coach Ralph and the Diploma, that stuff was hilarious. I really hope next season Frost and Caitlin kind of become one, like Professor Hulk in Endgame, or Caitlin becomes in control with Frost powers, or, Frost becomes in control with Caitlin's intellect or something like that. I'm really starting to feel as if Caitlin isn't necessary on the show, and this just shows in the last few episodes of the season, as in my opinion her lack of presence did not really make that big of a difference. Speaking of which, I also thought it was very, very fitting that Danielle's final episode for the season was always planned to be episode 19, which happened to be the finale, and I totally understand why she was heavily underused in those last few episodes, but I still feel as if she's just not as necessary anymore, and the writers are really stretching to come up with ideas for her character. Now moving on to Carlos Valdes as Cisco Ramon/Vibe and Cisco Ramon/Echo from Earth 19. Carlos Valdes, as always, brought a whole lot of charisma, energy, and vibrant personality to the team, which I love about him so much. Hence why he's my second favourite character on the show, with the first being Barry, of course. His relationship with Kamilla grew on me a lot, with marvellous chemistry with Victoria Park, who I'll get to later. Especially in the Cisco-centric episode in 605, where we also see a really cool alternate version of Cisco, which was really fun to explore. Although I don't like that they killed Gypsy though. We start to see him regretting his powers, which I'm low-key happy about, as I thought it was dumb that he got rid of his powers in the first place. And unlike Caitlin, in the episodes he was not in, his lack of presence was very noticeable. I loved his fight scene with Barry in the final episode of the season. They have one of the best friendships and romances and fight scenes in the whole Arrowverse, in my opinion. Non-physical, of course. And I am very excited to see where the tease with him in Atlantis goes next season. Now let's move on to Hartley Sawyer as Ralph Dibny / Elongated Man. Unfortunately, this season was very light on Ralph, not in regards to the storytelling of his character, but in regards to how much he was in it. However, when he was in it, Hartley Sawyer was given marvellous writing to work with. In the first graphic novel, we get to see the private investigator side to Ralph, investigating Sue, which was really good to see. And in the second, we finally get the long-awaited arrival of Sue Dearbon, hopefully soon Sue Dibny. Hartley Sawyer and Natalie Dreyfus had phenomenal chemistry, more on Sue later, and I'm really, really excited to see where their relationship goes in Season 7 and hopefully well beyond. Now let's move on to Danielle Nicolay as Cecile Horton. Cecile as a character is one that I don't find to be that interesting by herself. When she was given her own storyline in episode 2, as a lawyer uncovering the Allegra case, I found myself becoming very disinterested. However, in the second half of the season, when Jo was put into witness protection, I found that she was becoming much more interesting, sort of becoming a female version of Jo. This was also noticeable when Jesse had his back injury last season, and Cecile took his role on the show. Also, I guess we'll never know. We'll see what happened to her daughter Jenna again, as she hasn't been seen in ages. But let's move on to the villain of the second half of the season, Ephrat Dor as Eva McCulloch. Now, this might sound as a little bit of a hot take, but I thought Eva McCulloch was a pretty good villain. I loved how manipulative she was to Iris in the first couple of episodes. They were stuck in the Mirrorverse together, and once she came out and killed Carver. And I found the whole mystery of how she got stuck in the Mirrorverse and her controlling the mirror versions of the characters to be very, very interesting. Her motivation was clear, with many catchy catchphrases to go along with it, e.g. success is assured, and her assuming the role of the CEO of McCulloch Technologies after Carver's death and setting up Sue for the murder of him looks to be really, really intriguing, and I'm annoyed we never got to properly close out a character this season the way it was supposed to be, but I look forward to seeing it next season, but I hope the story is not just rushed. Now let's move on to Tom Cavanagh as, oh boy, this is a long list, Nash Wells / Pariah, Harry Wells, Sherloque Wells, and Eobard Thawne / Reverse Flash. Wow, that's a tongue twister. As always, Tom Cavanagh returns to the Flash with a whole new character, but this time with many returning ones. The new Wells, Harrison Nash Wells, kind of inspired by Indiana Jones, took a wild go on me, I'm not going to lie. I found him to be a little bit too narcissistic for my liking, and despite most Wells' acting it, this one was much more irritating for me. But after a few episodes and, his relationship with Cisco strengthening, I really started to like him and he started becoming a really good character. His investigation of Marnoville was great, leading to the eventual transformation of Pariah, which was forgotten about soon after. We also find out about a new element called Eternium, which also goes nowhere in the season. In the second graphic novel, Nash deals with the repercussions of crisis and the merging of all Earths, with him seeing all different versions of Wells in his head. Seeing Harry initially return was jaw-dropping. It was insane, but the novelty soon wore off when it was revealed that it was just inside Nash's mind. Seeing Eobard return as well was great, as always. However, I feel as if he is appearing a bit too frequently and starting to become a bit overused. However, I'm curious as to whose body he will take over next season. Bloodwork is a theory I've seen a lot on social media. Maybe him? I don't know. I had hoped for all the Welleses to combine into one. But other than in the final episode for a quick moment, the storyline is soon forgotten after episode 15. I also really hope that this is the last new Wells, especially as the multiverse is no more, and I think it is becoming too monotonous in my opinion. I will discuss the National Allegra storyline when I get up to Allegra soon in the recurring character section. The final main character I will be discussing is Jesse R. Martin as Joe West. Joe West, as always, was the backbone of the season once more, having the most emotional scene in the entire season, in my opinion, in episode 4, preparing for Barry's death. Barry crying over Nora's crib, wow, that's tongue twister, that is a close second for me. Although Joe was in the season very little, his presence was greatly felt. Seeing him take up the role of the captain of the CCPD was really good for the little time we did see him, as after 6 years it is what he deserved. Additionally, him refusing to go into witness protection in order to defeat Carver was also very much in Joe's relentless character, and him eventually going into witness protection was also fairly emotional, despite me knowing that he was most likely going to come back very soon, which he did. And for the first time I sensed genuine chemistry between Jesse and Danielle Nicolay when Cecile and Barry were waving him off. So now I'm done with the main characters, now let's move on to the recurring characters, starting with Sendhil Ramamurthy as Ramsey Rosso / Bloodwork. Sendhil Ramamurthy returns to playing yet another Doctor with an English accent, portraying Ramsey Rosso in The Flash Season 6. His debut in the trailer gave me chills, but in the actual season, he took a while to find his groove in my opinion. While I understand we needed character development for him before fully becoming a villain, I felt as if his storyline and trying to find the cure for HLH was purposely dragged out too long, in order to fill the 8 episodes he was in. Eventually, after the first few episodes of him only being in discussions with Caitlin, I really felt as if he was becoming a really good villain, with that discussion with Barry in episode 4 really solidifying him. Episode 7 was obviously the highlight for his character, with phenomenal acting from both Sendhil and Grant. And seeing him in his true form in episode 8 was also really cool, with pretty solid CGI. I was very surprised when he returned in episode 17, and I'm hopeful that he returns in season 7, given that his character was not fully written off. Will he combine with Reverse Flash to create Red Death, be recruited by Black Hole? The possibilities are endless. Most of these ex-characters will be very, very short discussions, with the exception of only 2, purely because there is really not much to say about them, or because there were barely any episodes. So kicking off this list is Brandon McKnight as Chester P. Runk. Chester P. Runk was a character that I felt was completely unnecessary to have. And although he was introduced in the show because he's one of Eric Wallace's favourite characters from the comics, I felt as if he was only there to fill in the gaps of the scientific and comedy relief character when Cisco was not there. And unless Cisco is not in season 7 as a regular, which I really hope he is as one, his character I believe will not do well having pretty much 2 of the exact same character in the room at the same time. Nevertheless, I'm still intrigued, I guess, as to what happens with his character next season now that he is a series regular. Now moving on to Victoria Park as Kamilla Hwang and Amira Kamilla Hwang. I don't know if I mispronounced that, I'm sorry if I did. In my opinion, Kamilla was a mediocre character of the season. There wasn't really much to her, with the exception of great chemistry with Carlos in episode 5, and showing a little bit of a photography side throughout the season. Even having her in the Mirrorverse, the creation of the mirror duplicate, and death of the copy, didn't really do much for her character in my opinion. We also don't know what's going to happen to her next season. Is she leaving the show, becoming a series regular? What? It's all up in the air at the moment. But yeah, there's not really much else to say about her. Now let's talk about Kayla Compton as Allegra Garcia and Maya. Allegra Garcia is a character that was just there, in my opinion. She didn't add much to Team Citizen or to Team Flash, and the only thing reasonably interesting about her was her relationship with Nash, both on his world and the current. But her anger for him acting as a father figure when he's not her father quickly became irritating. Also, her relationship with her cousin Ultraviolet was okay, I guess, and her parents and everything. Nothing much else to add, but I'm intrigued at the most to see what direction her character goes in next season, which we'll have to wait a long time for, January 2021. Now let's move on to Patrick Sambogi, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, not sure, sorry, as David Singh and Mira David Singh. Seeing Captain Singh, or now Police Chief Singh, return was great, even if it wasn't the real Singh. However, as soon as he returned, I knew something was up with him. You know, he wouldn't just give up on a case that easily, and a theory of him becoming the mole, which ended up being correct, quickly spread across the internet. I hope to see the proper version of his character next season, and to escape the Mirrorverse. Can't actually remember if we saw him this season or not, did we? I don't think we did, at least. I don't know. Anyway, but I hope to see the real version of him debut if he didn't. And if he did, I must have just forgotten. But yeah, because he's stuck in the hospital now, isn't he? So yeah, look forward to seeing him next season. Now let's talk about Natalie Dreyfus as Sue Dearbon. After 3 years of having Ralph Dibny there without any love interest, we finally got the very long and anticipated arrival of his wife in the comics, Sue Dearbon. Brilliantly portrayed by Natalie Dreyfus, with excellent chemistry with Hartley Sawyer, Sue's sassy and charismatic personality really mixed in with the cast marvellously. I love that they also expanded from her comic book origin, with her being more of an assassin and Black Widow-esque type character, rather than the socialite side to her, as they gave a new take on Sue never been written before. The motivation behind the character in order to clear her parents' name was also really interesting, and the cliffhanger with her being set up by Sue to make it look as if she killed Carver gets me really excited to see more of her character next season. Hopefully, eventually down the track, Sue and Ralph would date and get married, or am I having unrealistic expectations? Anyway, let's move on. Finally is Eric Ninigar as Joseph Carver. I think I'm mispronouncing his last name. Sorry about that. Joseph Carver, former CEO of McCulloch Technologies and leader of Black Hole, was a great sub-villain within the season. He was very well portrayed by Eric Ninigar, once again, probably butchered his name, sorry about that, and had a great rivalry with Jesse, and an okay one with Efrat or Eva. However, I wish he was in more than 3 episodes, as that would have made much more impact on his death. Speaking of his death, which was anticipated throughout the entire second graphic novel, I thought it was very cool how Barry ran in front of the shards and Eva pushed them through his shoulder to stab Joseph. That whole scene was really, really cool, and I'm really excited that he, along with Caitlin, were both able to finish their character arcs within the season. Now I finished talking about both main and recurring characters, as well as the good, bad, and mixed things about the season, so let's talk about my overall thoughts on the season. Here we go. So overall, my thoughts on the season are, look, nothing's perfect. The season definitely has a lot of flaws. The pacing was a little bit off. I had really, really strong episodes, and then, had a little break between, action stuff, which I wasn't that big of a fan of because it just ruined the momentum of the season. But I absolutely loved that Eric brought his own take to the season and created a different version of the show The Flash that we've never seen before. As I said before, I wasn't that big of a fan of, brooding Barry and, the tone of the season, but, I think it was also good because Eric brought his own distinct flavour to the season, which I really enjoyed. And also, as I said many, many times, I'm disappointed that it never got to actually properly wrap up the way it was expected, but obviously that can't be helped. I think Eric Wallace has really, really brought this show back to life, especially after the questionable Season 5 and okay Season 4. But yeah, this is definitely the third best season of the show. It will probably be Season 1, then Season 2, then Season 6, then Season 4, then 3, then 5 in my opinion. That's the ranking I'm doing. And standout episodes are Episode 7, The Last Temptation of Barry Allen Part 1, Episode 9, Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3, Episode 11, Love is the Battlefield. I'm kidding. I hated that episode, as I said before. Anyway, Episode 14, Death of the Speed Force, Episode 15, The Exorcism of Nash Wells, and Episode 17, Liberation. So overall, I would give Season 6 of The Flash an 8 out of 10. It was very, very solid. Obviously had a lot of flaws, but it was also very, very good. Thank you, Eric Wallace, for bringing my favourite show back to life. And thank you guys for watching this video. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please consider clicking that subscribe button down below and turning the post notifications on so you guys know when I upload a video. Please be sure to like, comment, share, do all those things. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll try and upload more going forward. My name is Jordan, and I am out. Bye!